weekend, we learned a lot about the Pelicans, including an issue from last season that may impact what they do with Zion Williamson this offseason. It's a Monday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Monday, day after a back-to-back for the New Orleans Pelicans. 2 losses to the Houston Rockets in big fashion and to the Memphis Grizzlies a little bit closer. I've got about 3 things that I think we learned over the weekend that are really telling about this team and the direction that they're going to look, to go in this offseason and into next season. And one of them is a big one with Zion Williamson. So we're going to cover it all in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So let's get into these 2 games and what we learned from the New Orleans Pelicans. First, the 146-117 loss to the Houston Rockets, and then the 107-104 loss with no Zion Williamson to the Memphis Grizzlies. That's the game we're going to focus on first. And by the way, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. So I want to start with the game against the Memphis Grizzlies, 107-104. No Zion Williamson in this one. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, that probably means we won't learn as much about the team when, their best player, the guy that they're still going to build around, is not playing. And to that, I'm going to go, hold on a second here, because I think there was a lot to learn in this game, particularly with no Zion Williamson. So in this game, the Pelicans had an offensive rating of 109.5. That's bad. That's a terrible offensive rating. That's points scored per 100 possessions, so it equalizes things for pace. That's real bad. And it got me thinking about how basically with no Zion Williamson out here on the court, the offense fell off a cliff. And we've seen this in times too when he's been playing this season. When he sits on the bench, the Pelicans offense really struggles. And look, it's not tremendous insight to say when your best player isn't on the court, the team's going to be worse, right? Anyone could do this podcast if that's going to be the case then. But I've got some more insight for you with it here because the numbers are kind of stark. And this is going to get to a larger point here, so bear with me for a second. When Zion Williamson is on the court for the New Orleans Pelicans, they have an offensive rating per cleaningtheglass.com of 117.1. That would be 7th best in the league. Without Zion Williamson, their offensive rating is 108.5, which is 3rd worst in the league. So you go from nearly being a top 5 offense with Zion to being a bottom 5 offense with Zion. That's a very big contrast right there. Basically, when you eliminate some garbage time in this, the offensive rating with Zion on the court gets better by about 8.6 points per possession. It's pretty significant, and I wanted to see how that would compare to some of the other best players in the league here. Again, it's not tremendous insight to be like, hey, are the Denver Nuggets better? Is their offense better with Nikola Jokic on the court than off, right? Same for Steph Curry or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. We don't even need to look at the numbers here to kind of say yeah, we know that's going to be the case. And truthfully, it is. Those are actually the 3 top guys. Nikola Jokic, Steph Curry, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander have, with Jokic, it's actually wild. It's 24.6. Their offense is that much better with him on the court than off the court. Zion Williamson, when you look at that 8.6 number, that's actually 13th best in the league for guys who've played 500 or more minutes. And that gets to the crux of the point, right? This is an issue that they've had from a couple of years ago. Going into last season, right? Remember Zion kind of working off ball a little bit more. They wanted to kind of build an offense that wasn't as Zion-centric, partially because they didn't trust him to be healthy. And so when he was not on the court, if he missed extended time, you've got to have an offense that still will work. And they couldn't really figure it out. And truthfully, it wasn't the right move. When Zion's on the court, give him the ball. Can you find a way to get other points without him off there, right? So here's the thing with that. Building a Zion-centric offense is clearly the right move here, isn't it? Build it around him. Don't do what they did like a year or two ago. We're like, oh, we're going to try and work him off ball. You remember those comments in the beginning of the year when he was like, yeah, I'm kind of struggling right now. I'm trying to figure out how I fit in and what to do. And I get why the Pelicans did that, but ultimately it just gave them a worse offense when Zion Williamson was on the court. Then they shifted back to basically point Zion, and everything got better. So yeah, you should build your offense around Zion Williamson. But here's the thing. Nikola Jokic, Steph Curry, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, some of the other guys that we could look at here, Tyrese Maxey, Jimmy Butler, even LaMelo Ball's in that mix, and then a couple of role players too. With Jokic, with Curry, with SGA, all of those players have played more than double Zion's minutes this year. So say it's like, the argument you could make then is like, should the Denver Nuggets not build a Nikola Jokic-centric offense? Because it's like massively, that's like double basically Steph Curry's number, who's second here. And the answer to that, I would say, is no, because Jokic plays. Jokic plays with Zion Williamson. The big question is he going to play? So if he's going to play, 2,500 minutes per season, whatever, those type of starters do, yeah, you should build your offense around him and then ride those limited minutes when he's not on the court out, and you deal with it, right? If you look at Nikola Jokic this season, he's played 57 games. He's playing 36.3 minutes per game. You look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander here, he has played 61 games. He's averaging 34.2 minutes. You contrast that with Zion Williamson because of that hamstring injury and the other injuries in his career, right? Zion Williamson has played 26 games and is playing 28.4 minutes per game. Now, I think he can play more minutes, and they're doing that, frankly, just to tank a little bit because there's no reason not to. But as of right now, Jokic has played over 2,000 minutes. Steph Curry has played almost 1,800 minutes. Shai has played over 2,000 minutes. Zion Williamson this season has played 737 minutes. If he can play those numbers that Jokic, even Curry or SGA are playing, you should do this, and it's not a problem. If you have a concern about that, or you're just like, no, we got to keep him at a 30-minute cap, that's 12 minutes when he's not going to be on the court that you're going to be losing every single game. That's essentially you losing a quarter. You can't, or it's more than that, right? Like, that's not something that is a tenable number for New Orleans to do going forward. It's 48 minutes. I got my math wrong right there. So, if he's playing 30 minutes per game, that's 18 minutes that you are not going to have him out there that you are always going to lose. With Jokic, it's 12 minutes. That's at least much more doable, right? Like, that becomes a pretty significant difference. And this gets to the ultimate point and question that New Orleans is going to need to answer this year. Do you trust Zion Williamson to be healthy next season? It's an open-ended question right now. The Pelicans are going to have to answer it for better or worse. They're likely going to answer yes. And I get it, and I don't disagree with that. But also, if you look at this and realize, the on-off numbers with Zion are pretty stark. So are Jokic, so are Curry, so are SGA's, but they play. Is this a tenable situation to build around? Because the moment Zion gets hurt, if he gets hurt again, you're just toast. And that's not a good position to be in because those other guys aren't. They don't have the same injury track record that Zion Williamson does. Curious what you think about this and the stark differential in the on-off numbers. His on-off numbers are better than, for the offense, better than Giannis, better than Jamal Murray, Franz Wagner, Zach LaVine. I'm just literally looking at some good players here. He elevates the offense more than Luka Doncic does, then Kyrie Irving, Scoot Henderson, Cade Cunningham. We can put a bunch of names out, Karl Anthony Towns, Sabonis, a number of names out there. He elevates the Pelicans offense significantly more than those guys do their own. That tells you how good he can be, but you got to play. And that's a big part of the problem here. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. So coming up next, I want to look at the physicality. We're just going to go back to the Houston games and even this one too, and rebounding issues. Then we'll talk about the defense in the third segment in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They swoosh, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the next day, and it's super simple. When any player scores 50 or more in a game during the 24-25 NBA regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order, up to $10 off the next day from noon until midnight. So after an epic 50-point performance, celebrate by ordering wings, pizza, or burgers from your favorite spot delivered straight to your door. Or fuel your watch party, having friends over to watch the game? Order your go-to snacks and meals at a discount and get ready for more high-scoring action. So sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. We're the #1 Pelicans podcast for a reason here. Let me know in the comments down below if you're an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. And don't forget about the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com. And start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pelicans newsletter. All right, let's talk about another thing we learned over the weekend, because it actually happened in both of these games. And I think you can see the thing about Zion in basically every game this year. But I want to look at what we learned over the weekend, because to me, it's three big things really jumped out. The first one being no offense without Zion Williamson. By the way, in this game, to kind of hammer that point home a little bit more, that 15-point third quarter for New Orleans was we're actually going to talk about that one again here. But in this game, they started Jordan Hawkins because there was no CJ McCollum in this, or not Jordan Hawkins, sorry, Jose Alvarado, because there was no CJ McCollum. He actually finished with a career-high 11 assists in this one. Of all basically the starters, other than Kelly Olynyk, who's played well, he had a neutral plus-minus, 0. Trey was minus 26. Misi was minus 14. Hawkins was minus 12. Olynyk was plus 10. And then Jose was 0. It just shows you that they need someone organizing the offense. In the first half, they looked really good because the ball was moving. You know, it was the 0.5 offense that Willie Green wants, kind of read and react and do things. And it was Jose Alvarado keeping that going, something that this team needs. It's why they traded for Dejounte Murray, figuring he could be the missing piece. But it kind of comes to the forefront in a game like this where they struggled to score. And it's like, okay, you need a point guard just to set these dudes up, because there's a very big lack of self-creation with a number of the players on this roster. Which, look, yeah, you have Murray, who's supposed to give you creation, Jose, Zion. You know, Trey can do it a little bit, but not as much. That's kind of the group. CJ at times, you know, usually you have enough here. One day I will get over whatever I had like 3 weeks ago. Sorry for the coughing. And you can kind of see it in this one. They need a point guard on the court when Zion isn't there. Now, let's go to the game against the Houston Rockets. 117 loss with Zion Williamson in this game. This game kind of exposed an issue that came up in that game on Thursday that the Pelicans had against the Houston Rockets, and that's dealing with physicality here. In that game, particularly the second half, the game on Thursday of last week, that the Pelicans lost to the Rockets. You know, Zion was visibly frustrated with the refs. We talked about that on Locked On Pelicans on Friday. The everydayers know this, that like he just struggled with the physicality, did not look very good in that time, and just didn't know what to do. Same thing against the Houston Rockets on Saturday. Zion Williamson played almost 28 minutes in this game. He's on minus 37. Those minutes were real bad. Really, really bad. Anyone else who played like that many minutes? Look, Misi played 28, minus 7. CJ McCollum, minus 16. Trey played more minutes than him, minus 15, right? Hawkins played 27 minutes, minus 17. They just got run out because they struggled to score because of the physicality of the Houston Rockets defense. The refs weren't really calling a ton in this game. Zion Williamson only went to the line 2 times. Finished 10 of 19. It's not bad for 20 points. So the efficiency looks kind of rough because he doesn't shoot three, so he needs to get to the free throw line to really make that happen. Against the Memphis Grizzlies, and that led to, some turnovers and issues for New Orleans there. Against the Memphis Grizzlies on Sunday night, after Barkas, by the way, which was fun to go down to before the game, you saw that third quarter, the Memphis Grizzlies just ratcheted up the physicality of that game. And New Orleans really had no answer and no response, and they only scored 15 points. Now, part of it's without Zion Williamson, but with the defense kind of playing like it was for the Memphis Grizzlies, who themselves did not play particularly well on offense, the team struggled and they don't exactly know what to do here. They shot 6 of 18, that's 33% in the third quarter. Literally only Trey Murphy and one shot from Yves Missi was made. Two players made buckets in the third quarter. Trey was 5 of 7 for 12 points. So that's good. Missi went 1 of 2. The Pelicans got to one trip to the line from Karlo Makovic. They just did not know what to do with the physicality. The physicality and Memphis playing them tough essentially took New Orleans completely out of the game. Turned into 6 turnovers for New Orleans in that quarter alone. That is a good way to lose a basketball game. And while New Orleans was able to come back because I don't believe in the Memphis Grizzlies at all, and their offense really does struggle even with John, whoever else they have here, they should have been toast, right? Like they should have been done in that quarter and the game shouldn't even have been close at that point in time. And so that's something that they really, really need to try and figure out, because this is a good way to lose the game in this quarter here. Like there's just nothing else that you can really do when it comes to that. And so I'm looking at the quarter report here. The Memphis Grizzlies had 10 fast break points alone, I think, in the third quarter. That might be cumulative here. As I'm looking, it's cumulative, so it's not that. They had, I don't even know what the numbers are, but those turnovers killed New Orleans on offense. And it wasn't that Memphis was like an elite defensive team. They just out-physicaled New Orleans. New Orleans was in this game because for the most part, they came to play. Like I will give them that. They showed up and they really tried hard. It wasn't the best offensive game that we've ever seen from anybody in this one. But they did show up and they wanted to try. And Memphis in this one just was like, nah, we're going to play harder than you. We're going to out-physical you in the third quarter. This is something that's got to be addressed, right? This has also been an issue this year when it comes to rebounding too, that New Orleans just kind of gets out-physicaled. And you saw it with the second chance points in this one. Memphis had 24 to New Orleans' 11. You're going to lose the game when you're not winning points in the paint. They didn't here because they struggled to defend inside. More on the defense in the next segment. But the second chance points was 24 to 11. That's been a big issue for them all season long, and we've discussed this. Is getting defensive boards, fighting for those, but they just kind of lack it for whatever reason. And even when they're running that 3 big lineup with Zion there, it's not necessarily looking particularly great at times. So New Orleans is what they're going to need to do this offseason is just get more physical. They're going to need to add, the archetype you would use is like a Josh Hart level guy. Josh Hart's never going to lead the team in scoring or anything like that. But man, does he make a difference just from being such a physical player? It's like the Najee Marshall example as well. Someone who's just going to go out there, play real hard, like get in people's faces and not back down from your opponent here. And look, it's tough for New Orleans when they have someone like Zach Edey, who's just an absolute monster, grabbing 7 offensive rebounds by himself. And Karlo Makovic, who's undersized compared to him, did a good job with 10 rebounds here. But there does need to be a greater sense, I think, of physicality on offense. You don't have it from the guards. Jose and Hawkins are not physical, and when you play physical with them, that can be a little bit tough. Trey has put on more strength and muscle, so he finishes a lot better around the rim, but can be prevented a little bit. Right? Misi's still finding his way because he doesn't know what to do. Kelly Olynyk is not someone that I would call a physical player by any stretch. There's Bruce Brown, maybe, who can be, but he shot 1 of 7 and looked just frankly awful offensively in this game. Antonio Reeves, Jamal Cain, who got minutes in this one. Reeves had a nice little stretch too, making 3 3-pointers in the first half, but those aren't physical players. Maybe Dejounte Murray is, but we really didn't get to see much of him this season. Zion is at times, with the way he plays, but since he doesn't get calls, he gets kind of frustrated with that. They need to find a way to add some physicality to this team. The easiest thing might be upgrade your center spot with like a true shot blocker, rim protector, if you can find that, and that maybe fixes this problem. Let's talk about that because it ties into the defense that I think is easier to fix than you realize. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. So if you've got your eye on a couple underdogs this year, FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. And the FanDuel app is super easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly, no waiting around. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. Please, God, one day I will not cough again, which would be really cool. I, again, apologize for this for like 3 weeks right now. So thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. For your second listen, go check out Locked On Saints, restructuring Derek Carr's contract. Fun. Is he going to be the starter? Could that mean when could they get rid of him is kind of what I'm looking at. Ross Jackson over at Locked On Saints, making sense of everything black and gold. Make Locked On Saints your second listen today. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Okay, let's look at the defense here because that's been a big issue for New Orleans all season long. And when you look at that game against the Houston Rockets, 146-117, not great whatsoever. And actually, when you look at that game, say you didn't watch it and you're like, how did the team lose this? And look, it was basically Houston from the get-go, building their lead. New Orleans made a little bit of run before halftime, before some momentum kind of swung not in their favor. They're even with Houston in basically like every good statistical category. Both teams scored 70 points in the paint. Park that number. They each scored 25 second chance points, so they didn't lose either of those two things. They lost the fast break battle 24-18, but not that significant there. For the most part, New Orleans wasn't like turning the ball over at an exceptionally high rate. It was 13 turnovers to 10 for the Houston Rockets. That kind of accounts for the fast break numbers there. New Orleans was outscored by 5 from 3-point range. So that's 15 points. That doesn't really account for 146-117, basically a 30-point win, 29-point win for the Houston Rockets here, right? The biggest lead for Houston, this one was a 37-point lead. So when you kind of say all that, it's like, how did New Orleans lose by that much? The defense was terrible. The number, truthfully, that tells you how they lost is giving up 70 points in the paint. No team, really, unless you're New Orleans, is going to, or Houston is going to win when you give up that many points in the paint, which are just easy buckets for the opponent here. And New Orleans this year has seen their defense fall off a cliff in a very negative, bad way, obviously, right? This is something that I do think, though, they can fix, right? The defense wasn't great in this one against the Houston Rockets. I don't think it was particularly good against Memphis, too. I just don't believe in the Memphis Grizzlies. They have not had a strong resume, and struggling to beat some bad teams doesn't impress me much, and their offense looks very clunky with Ja Morant out there who's not shooting particularly well overall, right? Desmond Bane at times, has been kind of quiet, and when those two both aren't on the court for him, they really do struggle. But so let's say New Orleans didn't do a great job defensively against the Memphis Grizzlies, because honestly, I don't think that they did. I do think New Orleans this year next year can fix their defense pretty quickly. I think what we're seeing defensively from this team is, you're missing some of your top guys. Right? Herb Jones hasn't played in a minute, isn't playing the rest of the way. He's the top defender on the team. We expect him to be good back, shutting guys down. Would have helped with someone like Desmond Bane, would have helped with a Ja Morant in this game. Dejounte Murray, despite his defense very much slipping while he was in Atlanta and not being good here defensively, in theory, could be a good defender. And if we got to see an extended run of him and Herb Jones together, that would have been pretty great and really could have changed the season for New Orleans. With Zion Williamson defending like he is, you could argue he's the best defender on the team right now. Maybe. I'd be really curious to see, what they are capable of doing here. And I'm trying to pull up some of the numbers here for the team stats. Really curious to see what they could have done defensively. The issue that you're going to see from them this year is the shots in the paint and those games where they are just giving up too many shots at the rim. And look, Jonas Valanciunas helped with the defensive rebounding, didn't help rim protection, but being a big body down there did kind of scare some teams off from driving. And New Orleans, the past couple of years, has done a very good job of just not allowing teams to get into the paint. And this year, they're allowing teams to get into the paint at a very, very high rate this season, and it's not been good. New Orleans is fourth worst when it comes to percent of opponent shot attempts at the rim. 34.9% is what is going on this season. Let me see what it was last year. It was 34.9. So call it 35% this year to make the numbers pretty easy. That's only 0.5% better than the worst team in the league. New Orleans was only giving up 31.6% last year. It's a pretty stark and significant difference at that point for it all. Let's see what they're giving up in terms of opponent shooting percentage at the rim. And these two kind of go hand in hand. New Orleans is 21st. So they're 7th worst. Teams are shooting 67.5% against them at the rim. Last season, teams were shooting a high rate at the rim against them, but they weren't letting them get to the rim in the first place. This is fixed one of two ways. Get all your guys back and just not let teams get into the paint and don't let them shoot at the rim. Health will simply do that. It will immediately improve the defense by that alone. The other way to do it is probably something they're going to look to do anyway, and that's acquire another center. Upgrade the center spot. We like Messi, but if you can get a Jared Allen, get somebody else in here, maybe that's the move to do it to really improve this team and this roster. And I think that's something that you will see the team try and do this offseason. Either of those things, or both of them combined, should improve the defense for this team by a very good amount. So I think while we're learning the defense is bad, it's not like we needed to learn that over the weekend. We know that. I do think that's something that can be fixed a whole lot quicker than some of the other issues that we've talked about with the physicality and the Zion-led offense. Let me know what you learned over the weekend from the Pelicans here at the back-to-back games in the comments down below on YouTube. And that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all tomorrow.